Well, welcome back to the show. And today we're going to be talking with Amalia Fowler, who is a digital marketing expert, ran agencies for about 7 years, and now has headed back to the classroom to teach college-age students all about marketing, hoping to grow these marketers into competent, successful, and also ethical marketers as well. We have a great conversation because we dive into what are some of the things that businesses are missing in marketing and how digital marketing has sort of evolved into this idea of just marketing now versus traditional versus digital versus everyone needs to be at a table to help the client. And then lastly, one of the best things is what is she learning in the classroom about being a leader, a coach, a teacher? What are the skills or things that she would now apply differently if she went back into the business world? Fascinating conversation. The time just flew by, but there are so many nuggets, so many great pieces of information. I can't wait for you to hear it. So let's dive into today's episode of You're in Charge, Now What? With Amalia Fowler. Okay, Amalia, thank you so much for being here. And so, just chatting and following you online and connecting with you on Twitter, I just love your take on a few different things, and I want to dive into them today for the audience. Number one is, as a marketer, overseeing agencies, building agencies, and just dealing with clients in general, what do you see in today's marketplace? What do you think businesses or companies are missing when they are either executing on their marketing or creating a message for their marketing?
That is an excellent question. And the number one piece that companies are forgetting, in my experience, in my opinion, is to bring value to their audience and to look at their audience first. A lot of companies start with, the new bright, shiny thing, or they think, someone's cousin's aunt said, oh, you have to start with SEO in this particular situation.
Right.
And they forget the context, and who they are talking to is what ultimately matters first. You can't build a house without a foundation. You shouldn't start with the interior design of a house. Anybody would tell you that you need, I don't know a lot about how houses are built, but I do know that you need the foundation, you need the walls, you need the plumbing and the electrical, you need all of those pieces before you start with the fancy things. And so that's the first thing, is companies are forgetting who they are supposed to be serving and who they're supposed to be talking to, and often can't see the forest for the trees. They assume that they know who that person is because they've been in their business for so long, or they're so close to their business, but often they can be wrong about who they're actually speaking with.
Right. So do you think in that case, I think that's spot on, but do you think it's because they become enamored with either their product, that they think it's so great that it appeals to everyone, versus, as what I'm understanding you saying, is doing reverse engineering, meaning start with the customer, start with your audience, understand what they're looking for, and then say to yourself, does my product solve that? And then how do I connect the message? Am I right in what I heard?
Yeah, I think it depends. That's my favorite catchphrase. I'm probably going to say it a lot, but I think it depends on whether or not it's a brand new product or service, or if you've been in business for a while and you've just been throwing things at the wall to see what sticks, and now you want to make a concrete strategy and plan. I think there are different approaches. So if you're brand new, product market fit is obviously incredibly important. And so understanding your place and positioning in the larger market. I'm not a positioning expert, but April Dunford's book on positioning is incredible. It focuses on B2B, but a lot of those lessons can apply to B2C as well. But you have to understand, is there a market first, and what competitive alternatives exist? Because even if you look at my services in terms of management and marketing, people can choose to do nothing. That's technically a competitor to me. It's people not doing any of it.
Right, exactly.
They can just ignore it, or use a pen and paper. That's technically a competitive alternative to what I do. And then if you've been around for a while, the act of identifying those consumers who engage with your product and are champions of your product is one of the better places to start, because you want to have more people like them.
Right.
And a big missed opportunity is actually just talking to the people who already love what you do or are repeat consumers.
Mm-hmm.
Because in an ideal world, you're going to find more people who behave like them. And too often companies try to force behavior change instead of meeting people where they are now.
Yes. I that. So as I was listening to you, two things popped into my head. One is that idea and audience. For those of you who are in charge of the marketing, make sure you're stopping for a moment to really listen. Is that idea of understanding your competitors. There is sometimes an arrogance to say, well, I have no competitors, but very few products and or services don't have competitors. Theoretically, we could be competitors because I run an agency, you run an agency, but our philosophy is not so much that there isn't any competitors. Our philosophy is there's enough for everybody. So there's no reason to, badmouth another competitor or someone who's in the market or doing the same thing. Just, understand what your value prop is. But again, to the second piece, and I remember having Adrienne Barnes on the podcast talking about buyer personas, and one of the things that her company does is exactly that, reaching out to your customers to get feedback, and sometimes having that third party asking for feedback. You may get better feedback from them, because if I sold it to you and I ask, you may hold back. So I think that's really important. It sort of bookends in a way where it's understanding what you want to do, but getting that feedback to validate your positioning, or do I have to adjust based on feedback from my customers?
Absolutely. I was channeling Adrienne when I said that. I follow her on Twitter, and when I teach buyer personas to my students, I remove this emphasis on geography and demographics and really focus on behaviors and where they are online or offline. Right. I think another big mistake that marketing professionals make is assuming that you either have to be entirely online and that offline doesn't mean anything.
Right.
Because we talk so much about the digital world, and I mean, that is my world. But that does not mean I do not see the value of, a well-placed transit ad. If all of your audience are commuters, why aren't you in the space where they're commuting? Right. Like that just, I think we get really attached to binary ors, like traditional or digital, or, SEO or SEM. And we get really attached to these like binary ideas. And as humans, our cognitive biases, we're meant to make mental shortcuts. It's how we get through being so overwhelmed with information all the time. But it's also why I emphasize context so much. Right. Because if you're, you can have all these competitors who are all doing the same thing, do your audience research and realize, oh, my audience is, really into podcasts, and be the only one talking to them that way. Right. But if you didn't start with your audience, you wouldn't know where they are and how to speak to them.
Yeah. And I think that it's a really valid point you made about this idea of combining. I mean, I behind me, two other co-authors, we wrote a book about that called Connected Marketing, because when I was doing audits for some potential clients, you would see all of this waste. And it wasn't so much waste as you were saying in a particular silo, so to speak. You could say, oh, well, maybe your paid search was a little off, or your SEO. It was more the fact that one hand didn't know what the other one was doing. So there was that connection. So if I had something offline, if I ran a commercial, did a radio, if I did a direct mail piece, nobody asked the digital agency, where should I send them on the website? Do you need a landing page? Do you need something specific? And then if they had a physical location, well, when I went into the physical location, did I see something from the ad or some messaging that allowed me to go, oh, I saw it offline, I saw it on the website, now I'm here and I see it too. So it makes that connection. So let me ask you this: do you think it is going back to businesses? Do you think it is still a prevalent problem where people who are running the marketing allow all of this to be in silos, meaning that I have my call with my traditional agency, I have my call with my digital agency, I have my call with someone else, versus getting everyone to the table and saying, here's our initiative. Okay, radio, what are you going to do? And website, what are you going to do? So it becomes this collaboration. Do you see that being an area of opportunity, or do you see it happening all the time? And it's just, I've run across very few of it.
It's definitely not happening all the time. I would say it doesn't always need to happen. It's very business dependent. So like your average mom and pop shop that's,
right,
doing appliance repair probably does not need to engage all of those people at the same table. So business size, it depends on business size. It depends on your team. There's a lot of factors. However, if there are multiple people involved in marketing, they definitely do not talk enough, even internally. Like I've seen in-house teams that are incredibly siloed. That's another binary, in-house versus agency. Like
exactly.
It's not a competition. Both have pros and cons. The best campaign I have ever gotten the chance to work on is an insurance-based campaign here in the Lower Mainland. And I was lead on the digital side. There was a lead on the creative, there was a lead on the traditional, and there was a lead on media buying. And all of us, just the 4 leads and the client, would get together and we built the whole campaign that way. It is the most beautiful integrated campaign I have ever seen in my life. It works so well. They've captured a whole portion of the market they were going after.
Right.
And it's all because once a month while we were developing this campaign, we sat down and decided together what would work and who owned what and how to get from A to Z. We stopped some creative from going to market that would have been problematic on the digital side,
right?
Because it was an entire story in a video, but if you sliced it into images, it was problematic. Let's just put it that way. And so I still see it because I no longer am a part of the team that built that campaign, but I still see it and I still have this like pride around it when it's like, oh, that's a billboard and that's a bus back and that's the online version of this thing I helped create. So people don't do it enough. They don't always need to do it in that large scale.
I think, to that scale. But I think to your point, I think this is very valid for those of you who are running teams out there. If you're running, for our agency, we take that approach exactly what you were saying in, for the digital space where we have an account person, account manager, they oversee it. But depending on what services, if you're doing paid search and you're doing social media and you're doing content and SEO, you have 4 people and they're all collaborating together to provide this versus, to your point, I've consulted for some clients. And when I'm talking to the agency, well, the SEO team is in one building, the paid search team's in another building and they never talk to each other. It's just, again, that idea of a siloed approach where, well, I did my piece. Versus to your point, that collaboration.
Like a trade secret. They act like I can't tell you what I'm doing with the SEO.
Yes.
Because you're gonna steal it, or it's so proprietary. Listen, nothing in our world is
my secret sauce, as they say. I have secret sauce. I tell clients, if you have anyone telling you they have secret sauce, please run away because there is no secret sauce.
No, there isn't. There are 100,000 ways to do the same thing. And just different strategies, and to act like it's one of the things that really grinds my gears because we have so many issues in the industry. It's a very low barrier to entry. Google is our overlord. Like we're at their mercy. And what's the third one? Anyways, we have a bunch of issues.
Right.
And just the unethical behavior of some marketers because we're unregulated is the third one. We have so many issues to actually collaborate and tackle. Why are we hiding our strategies from each? Like anytime an agency or a client has left me has not been like because of someone else, like because of that kind of thing, like a little nuance in strategy. It's usually a changeover in who's on their side, someone's communicating better, just a better mesh of like personalities. And there's nothing I can do to prevent that. And not sharing my strategy with their partner is certainly not going to like keep them as a client of mine for a long time.
And I've run across that as well, where other agencies don't want to share, they don't want to talk, they won't give you access to go look at something or even basic analytics because they think something's set up. I said, there's only certain ways to set things up. It's not, you're preying on, as you just said, and folks, if you're in that position as leadership, to sometimes there is that disreputable agency that's going to prey upon the fact that the client doesn't understand what they're talking about. So they fall prey to I have secrets, I can't show you this, or the reporting is so basic. Well, you don't need to really understand this. So for all of you sitting in that chair, what's going to win? And what Amalia is saying to you is, what's going to win is your clarity, your transparency, your explanation, bringing them along for the ride, because at the end of the day, I need my client's viewpoint of what's going on to help me understand, as we circled earlier, I need them to help me understand their audience. And if it's a local business, where they draw from, where they want to market to. I could sit in my office and look at a map and guess, but I need them. But if I'm going to constantly keep everyone at arm's distance, then I don't think you have that collaboration. I don't think you have that successful marketing campaign. I don't think and I think going back to my very first question, I think that's one thing that businesses are missing, is demanding that transparency and demanding that someone explain to me, what are you doing for the money I'm paying you and what results am I getting?
Absolutely. And I also think more and more good practitioners in the industry are realizing that, SEO, SEM, content, UX, web, they all meet at this intersection of user experience.
Yes.
And so we should all have a hand in developing that user experience from a strategic perspective, because like I'm primarily an ads and a search marketing professional. They all go to the website. If I'm not speaking to the developer, if I'm not speaking with someone in content, if I'm not able to work with whoever's changing the website, then, what's the point of me doing half the work to send them somewhere that isn't going to end up converting them? Like that's not all
or
on
even
me.
having that website provider saying to you in your chair, saying, is the website tagged, or can I see where they're going, versus I'm dropping them on here, but you haven't set it up where I can see their path. I can see events, I can see conversions, I can see all the way through, so that now that allows me to make my marketing better, right? Because now I can send better signals back to, as you said, your overlord Google, right? All of it, we send the signals back, because then it makes the ads better. But if I don't have that, then I'm limiting my own performance. But you're right, that's that idea of collaboration versus, I can't tell you, don't tell me what to do, I'll do my, and you're going, well, wait a minute, the client, we're trying to support the client here and be successful.
I've even offboarded, like clients are like, I'm leaving, and I'm like not great, but like, okay, let me help you find your next person, because I have honestly audited and looked at so many different ad accounts where thousands of dollars of someone's hard-earned money is being wasted, and it drives me crazy. Like this is my soapbox. This is what I stand on literal stages and yell about, is you just like, why do we let this happen? There are so many good people in the industry, so many people who have excellent intent, and by us infighting over things that don't matter, we allow these unethical practices to occur. And what I would say to people who are running marketing in an organization is, if you ever ask a practitioner to come to the table with other practitioners for a discussion and they say no, that is a major red flag, and that I would really reconsider my relationship with that vendor.
Yes. Or even I've had times where clients, they come to us, or, we're either auditing or they're coming aboard as a new client, and they don't own access to anything. Now, again, we'll give, like, for their own, ad account. If some clients come and they don't have one, and we'll use ours. But if they want all of the accounts that are set up, if they're leaving, we'll give them to them, where there are a lot of other companies that'll say no. So now the client has to start, fresh again, however they want. But to your point is, they don't even allow anyone to look in. Can I have access to the ad account? Can I have access to analytics? There are some clients who come to us, don't even own their analytics to the website, or they don't own the, ad account for social media. And I think, oh my goodness, what's going on? Oh, well, the agency said it was better for them. And I said, well, that's because they're going to hold it over your head as hostage so that you don't want to leave. And to your point, that there's a lot of bad practitioners. So again, folks, listen to what we just talked about. If, you should own access to everything, and make sure it's very general. Don't make it the marketing person's email, because if the marketing person leaves, then you're stuck without access. But you need to own access to everything. If your agency won't give you access, wrong agency. If they won't come to the table to work in a collaborative with all of your other marketing partners, I agree. Red flag. I don't care. That means that they're afraid that someone's going to point a finger. Now, again, there are some agencies, like traditional agencies, sometimes, this, in the beginning, they would say, well, I don't want to sit with her. She's going to tell the client that what I do traditionally is garbage now. It's out of date. Give me all the money. And we're all past that, because I personally think, well, let me ask you this. I was having this discussion with someone. Do you think that digital marketing has now gotten to a point where it could be considered traditional marketing, meaning it just has to be done? That's what I mean by traditional. Like, it just has to be done now. It's not new shiny thing. It's just, we all have to do this now.
Yeah, you know what? I would buy that definition of traditional marketing being something that you have to do. And by the fact that I think I've encountered one business in the last 5 years that does not have a website. He replaced my window screens. It was really funny. We thought it was a scam, but he did a great job. But yeah, I would say that we all have to do it. And the way I think about it is, I've always taught it this way to my students, is you have your foundation, your overarching, the people you're talking to, the way you're speaking to them, what you want to achieve. You need your goals at that level. You need to know where you're going. And then you have like a strategy of kind of the overall messaging. And then you have your tool belt. You have all of these different tools you could use to help get there. And I just see traditional and digital, or traditional, quote unquote, the way we've spoken about traditional, I see out of home and broadcast and digital all in the same tool belt. I don't think one is better than the other. You have to look at all of the potential options you have, and knowing who your audience is, knowing where you want to go, and knowing where the gaps are in your existing strategy. You just pull the tools you need from the tool belt.
Yeah, the way that we talked about it in the book that we wrote, we got rid of those labels. We just said there's offline media, right? And so that's the way we talked about it. Offline would be, well, it could be radio, it could be TV, it could be the newspaper, it could be a piece of mail, but it's still, depending on your market, where you are, could be value. Online, we understand that, or in store, right? So all of that was being able to say it all works. Right. And I remember having a discussion with someone in an audience who said, well, the newspaper's dead. It's horrible. It doesn't work. And so I asked him, I said, what's the biggest newspaper in your area? And he named it. And I said, okay, what's the biggest day of circulation? He said, Sunday, of course. I said, okay, what if you got the back page or the front page of that newspaper, full ad for your business, and it cost you $1? Would you do it? He said, absolutely. I said, well, wait a minute. You just told me that newspapers are dead. So it's not the newspaper we're talking about. So it's the cost. Okay, now we can have that discussion. All of a sudden, it opened everyone's eyes to say everything could be effective depending on what you're willing to pay for, or its effectiveness, instead of, as you said very clearly, that binary yes or no versus maybe.
Everything depends. This is why I say it all the time. And my students laugh at me, but then we'll have a guest speaker come in, and in their guest speaking at some point, they'll say it depends, and the whole class will laugh. And then I have to explain why they're laughing at them. It's because of it, because it really does depend. No two businesses are the same. no two businesses, audiences are the same. No two strategies should therefore be the same. And we've got to stop saying things are dead. Like if someone tells you a tactic is dead, they are narrowly looking at said tactic. The QR code died, right? We killed it off as marketers. We're the last 2 years of our life, the QR code has been everywhere. Right. It was one of the most talked about Super Bowl commercials this year.
Well, it was also the fact that also the technology evolved. I remember QR codes, you do too. In the beginning, you had to download a specific app and maybe it worked. Now I just point your camera at it and it works. So it's easier. And also the situation of what's been going on the last 2 years, of course, the QR code. And now people have found a happy balance of saying, I like using it because it's easy, where before it might have been frustrating. And I agree with you, because there's another little something when you said, it just clicked in my head, was I think some people always look at this idea of a plug and play strategy, meaning I set up my strategy and it goes. There's so many businesses that are seasonal. So what happens during the winter or the spring or, summer? And so is this my busy season versus slow season? Do I ratchet up spending? Do I pull my spending back? Do I change the messaging? I think there are a lot of agencies out there or people doing marketing thinking, and maybe it's just because they're newer at it, they think it's a one size fits all, or it's a set it and forget it, or that's off my plate. I got that running because I have something else, versus being more of a chemist and sensing and pulling those levers back to adjust to get maximum performance for your client.
I love the idea of it being like a chemist and chemistry, because you're absolutely right. My very first agency, everything was cookie cutter, and I didn't know any better. I was a junior. I was learning from other people. Everything was, we did car dealerships. So there is not a lot of variance in the different car dealerships. We would also try, to be fair to us, to get car dealerships to tell us their unique selling proposition, but I don't know. The automotive industry is typically about 10 years behind everyone else when it comes to marketing. So free coffee and free Wi-Fi are never going to be unique selling propositions in the automotive industry. Everyone has it now. So that was like pulling teeth, but we were cookie cutter, and people in different regions of the same country search differently. I currently have campaigns running in New Hampshire and Massachusetts for a US service-based company. And the Massachusetts campaigns couldn't get them off the ground. It was the language. It was the fact that literally across the border, they search differently and they use different words, across a state border. And so if you're not paying attention to that, or the nuances of the seasons, or what your competitors are doing, it really is like being a chemist, where you have all these things, you have to mix them together. And every once in a while, an experiment explodes in your face, and then you have to figure out, okay, how do we adapt?
You have to also be honest with yourself and your clients to say not all marketing works. Some of it is it's a process, and we're trying to make progress during making these adjustments. And our agency does a lot of work with automotive dealers, and I would say maybe they're 2 years back now. We've moved them up a lot.
You've moved them up since I worked in automotive.
We've moved them up, but to your point, we have some Canadian clients and US clients, and from different states. And, some dealerships are in a metro market, some are in a rural market, some are trying to pull from a metro and make it a destination store. So you're right. There's 2 points, the 2 things that you said. One was this idea of they're very similar, and it's right. We have explained to our clients that a car is a car is a car to a lot of people, like a steak is a steak is a steak. And I worked in hospitality. So one of my mentors used to say, it's not about the food. Yes, the food has to be good, but in New York City, there's a million places you can get a good steak. It's the experience that wraps around it. We have to do it, and then we have to repeat it over and over and over again, because if we market it, then we have to deliver on it, right? And so same thing to you're saying is that I can create something, but if I'm not in lockstep with the client to say, can you really deliver this? Or really, what is your process first? What do you think you do better than everyone else? And then I can start creating a marketing message to push out into that industry. So I want to pivot, because you mentioned something, and I think it's a fascinating take. So you agency life, ran agencies, built agencies, and now you're back in the classroom and now you're teaching. So first, what was that decision of why teaching? And then second is teaching, running a team in business. What are similarities? What are differences? What did you bring from business to the classroom or classroom out to business? So first, why heading back to the classroom?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I spent around 7 years in an agency, and actually 3 of those as a director of marketing. So I rode a bit of a rocket ship because my first job in agency was at a startup. And so in those 3 years, I think I worked with 130 different clients. I built a team of 5, and at the end was managing about 5 million a year in ad spend. So not your typical first 3 years of a paid media career. So I was a director of marketing 3.5 years in, and then spent 3 more years helping build that agency and working with that team. And towards the end of my time at the second agency, I realized, and this is going to sound a little bit terrible, but like I was really tired of client communications. I'm good at it, but I was tired of the constant relationship management from an ongoing month-to-month standpoint. I had some amazing clients, and this is no shade on them at all. But as we all know, for every 10 amazing clients, when you are personally not in control of sales of the agency, there are 10 that really drain you throughout the week or the month. Like, just like there's bad agencies, there's also bad clients. That's just, there is on the other side.
Sure.
But I loved educating clients, and I am really passionate about helping them select the right marketing partner, like marketing matchmaking. I'm really passionate about educating businesses to find the right people to work with because of all those things that I mentioned earlier. So that education piece for clients was something I liked doing. And I kind of optimized my career the way I've optimized, hundreds of client campaigns at this point, where it was like, what is working? Well, I like educating, loved mentoring my new team members, loved doing teamwork and collaboration and being their manager. I did not like the client communication aspect. And I really didn't like the nitty-gritty HR salary conversations without a solid framework to work within. So my last agency was smaller and there was no compensation framework. And so I would get in these really weird feeling ethical positions for myself where I felt like my team deserved more, but there either wasn't more to give them or for whatever reason it wasn't going to come. And I was kind of like feeling really stuck in the middle, and I didn't like that.
Right.
So I thought to myself, well, how do I educate and mentor and keep a foot in the strategy world and get rid of the client part? And the answer was teaching back at the college I actually graduated from, because they're adults. I don't have to talk to them about their salary. Theoretically, they have everything under control. So if they don't do their assignment, that's not mine. Like, that's not a disciplinary conversation. That's just, there's consequences for not doing something. And the mentorship and collaboration piece is just off the charts. I love teaching them. I love teaching them so much. And I've had such a great first year in the classroom. Plus, it also helps me feel like I'm combating that like unethical piece in the industry, because I get in at the ground level. Every year I tell 250 future marketers, like, these are the things that are not great to do. Be transparent with your clients. If something doesn't feel ethical to you, like, then it probably isn't. Tell them the bad and the good, basically kind of this outline of how to be a good marketer. My husband laughs at me. I say, I just want to do good marketing. And he's like, what is that? And I'm like, but it is. It's just
I see. I understand exactly what you're saying. And I've done some teaching up at a college in Michigan. They somehow convinced me to, do it. So I went up, I'd fly up, do a class and do one remote. But you tweeted out something, excuse me, today, I think it was today, or maybe it was yesterday, about your teaching and how you said it makes you feel like, not that you don't know anything, but it's starting at the beginning again, and sort of reminding yourself maybe of things that you took for granted because now you have to explain them, and it re-energizes your passion about it, of what you're teaching. But I think what I took from the tweet about saying I starting afresh was how many things you may have taken for granted that you actually know and love, but were sort of on autopilot because you're in the day-to-day grind of an agency.
Yeah, 7 years of being one of the leadership team members at an agency, you forget how intimidating entering this industry is. You forget the learning curve, you forget how much there is to learn. And so teaching people who are brand new and being open to their questions and re-explaining and having these, before every exam, I ask them to write down anonymously, what they're afraid of with the exam, and I collect them at the break. And then I don't share them with anyone, but I put them in piles and I hold up the stack and I'm like, you're not alone. Look at how many of you are afraid of analytics, or look at how many of you are afraid of the Google Ads auction. And that's really reset a little bit how I think about learning in this industry, and how encouraging I think we really need to be of newer marketers. And on the flip side, I was also new. Working in academics is very different than working in agency. So if it weren't for the mentors supporting me right now, I would be lost. And so I have felt lost in the last 9 months in a way where I had not in the previous 7 years.
Well, let me ask you, because one of the things that I had to get used to, and my mentor at the school who took me under his wing, because I taught 3 semesters, he put his arm around me and just had this big smile and said, Glenn, here's the thing you have to learn. There's business speed and there's academic speed. And academic speed is very slow. Business speed is a lot faster. So there's a lot more meetings and there's a lot of more things to think about, especially if you're in a smaller agency or mid-size agency where you can have a meeting and say, let's try this. And everyone goes, sure, let's go. And off you run. He said, that doesn't happen. Just calm down. And so that was something fascinating. So let me touch on that, because that idea, you've hinted at it. So I want to expand this, because there's people who are listening to this who are in those positions that you were in, running, either they're newer to a team or even people who are experienced. And there is that sense of, well, we just got to move. And there's that sense of impatience, or we moving faster or not allowing people time. So as a teacher, and the things that you've learned over these 9 months teaching, what are some of the things that you look back, if you looked a little bit back at how you were running teams, what were some of the things? Because even if you were great, and from what you were saying before, early on, you said, I didn't have churn on my team, and I believe I was a good leader. Was there anything that you said, oh, if I did it again, I'm bringing this now with me to my next, if I go back into the business realm, what would you be taking that you learned, or re-energized, reignited, or learned something different from teaching in the classroom that you would bring forward into your next gig running a team of professional in the business world?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I am still doing my consultancy and hoping to grow that in whatever direction it ends up going. So I'm hopeful that I will build a team there as well, but I will be the person at the top. So that's a really interesting switch for me. I've always been, I guess, a middle manager or top middle manager. There's 2 things, and I don't think I didn't do them, but I think I realize now the importance of them, and that I would do it more often. And to be very clear, my management career definitely evolved. So I was not a great manager the first time around, but I did have 2 team members from that agency come to the next agency with me. So I actually pulled 2 of my top senior people eventually over to the second agency. And I think both of them would attest to the fact that I was a much better manager the second time around. So I think if I could do it a third time, I would emphasize 2 things. The first is curiosity, and the second one is vulnerability. So
explain them both.
I will. Curiosity. I think a lot of managers jump to the conclusion when their team members do something wrong that there was intent to do wrong, or laziness, or,
Yes. Okay.
they just like didn't pay enough attention to detail. And I have learned from students too, when, they don't hand in the assignment or they don't show up for the meeting they scheduled with you. My first question now is always, can you tell me why this happened? It's not, this shouldn't have happened. What are you doing? You're terrible, or whatever. Like, you can't come in hot the first time around.
No.
Because it might be you. You might have explained it terribly. You might have not set them up for success. What a lot of professors and managers don't realize is that their students or team members come in with some past trauma. Other professors have shamed them in class, or other managers.
Right.
They haven't been allowed to be themselves. And regardless of how nice and empathetic and wonderful and positive intentions you have, they're carrying that experience, and they're not going to come to you all the time when they should. And they're not they're working through stuff. We're all working through stuff.
Well, I think to your point, there's something that, again, I hope everyone's listening to this, is that idea of, one, getting emotions out of this, because that's always dangerous when it becomes about the person versus the actions, right? So I think what you're saying is we have to be very clear when we're not getting the results that we wanted. The way you and I are thinking along the same lines is, if I don't get the results I want, it's not them. This is actions. It's not personal. And I agree. I think most people come to work wanting to do a good job. There's some reason they decided this was right, or something impacted them that pulled them off track. Our job is to find out what happened. Even why sometimes is a very defensive question. Why did you do this? Versus, okay, let's walk through what happened, right? What are actions, right? So we're disconnecting it from a personal thing. It's like, just walk me through what happened here. And then maybe they can say, and the other piece I think is really important for managers to understand is, you're a manager. As much as you think we're friends, you have that title, or you're the teacher. There is a hierarchy that is ingrained in us to say, well, I can't be friends with the teacher. I can't just go up. I can't just go tell my boss, don't worry about it. So you're right. There's a lot of either past baggage, behavior, and you have to be cognizant of that. And I love that word curiosity, of digging in. Like I always tell my people who I'm coaching as managers, you need to be like a detective, right? So a detective, what happened? I always joke, we came on a crime scene. Here are the results. We have to go, okay, what happened here? Right?
And I love it because it's collaborative. So I always try to approach with this curiosity the first time around, and then collaborate. Okay, what are we going to do differently?
Yeah. How
are we going to approach this next time? I'm going to do this, you're going to do that. And then I send a follow-up email, and it's just the two of us. No one's getting CC'd. Like, it's not an HR thing.
Right.
But it's like, this is what we've agreed on. So that next time, if the same behavior happens again, you have conversation A to refer back to. And then you can approach with, we just discuss this.
Yeah. And to your point is, I think, again, you've just been knocking just so many of these, there's these beautiful nuggets that just keep popping out. And I don't want, again, I slow things down sometimes, because when you said, sometimes it's you. Oh, right. Yeah. I always said to myself, because my mentor taught me this years and years ago, first time, if your team is not getting the performance you want, first, it's shame on you. Like, you immediately should look to yourself first and say, maybe I didn't explain it. One of the best questions he taught me, and I've told every single person, and I still have people I coached 20 years ago, always say, I never forgot this, Glenn, which was, what do you remember from training about this?
I love that.
Because if they don't, they're going to only tell you, one, if they're comfortable enough, I don't remember. Okay, we'll do it again. Or maybe it's half and we can tweak. Or maybe the bigger thing is they know what they're supposed to be doing. They're choosing not to do it. That's a whole different conversation. But if my approach is all, how many times do I got to tell you to do this? Well, let's go. They're in their brains going, this is why I don't like Glenn. This is why I don't like Glenn. But if I actually said, well, wait a minute, you know what to do. Why aren't you doing it? It could be, well, I don't think your way works. I think my way is better. Completely different conversation. But I
Yeah.
think, again, everyone listen to that. First things first, focus on actions and focus on the first time to really think, maybe I wasn't clear. Like I've done it. I've done meetings and I think I'm perfectly clear. And my top people who've been with me for a while go, no, you weren't. No,
My
you weren't.
favorite moment from this term, because we lectured online a little bit in January because of the virus and the
Right.
Omicron spike. So we were online for a bit, and I was lecturing on the Scrum project management process. And if you know what that is, it's a complicated concept to understand.
Mhm.
I was like 20 minutes into this lecture and I get this private message on Zoom and it's like, you're going way too fast and none of us understand what's happening. And so like, I just loved that there was this person who was like, and they privately messaged me and I didn't say anything. I didn't call it out. I was like, this is really complicated. Let's go back. And I just
Right.
restarted the whole thing over
That's
again.
great.
But it's like, you can't, it was me. And honestly, I think in my first two management roles, even through the time at my second agency, there were times I didn't realize it was me. And like, that's the other thing is you're not going to be perfect, which leads me to the vulnerability side of things.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a lot of managers, they reach out to me on DMs to talk about this kind of thing. And the answer to almost all of their questions, because they're like, I don't know how to train this person. It's my first employee. I don't know this, or I don't know how to reach out to this person whose mom just died. Like, what do I do? And my answer always includes some level of tell them you don't know what you're doing.
Wow.
Like,
Yeah.
say to your employee, I'm so sorry to hear about your mom. I don't know what the best thing is to do right now, but I want you to know that the team and I are here if you need it.
Right. That's
right.
great.
Like I tell my students all the time, when I was in your chair, I had no idea what I was doing. And it just brings, it takes that inherent power that is involved in being a manager or involved in being a professor. And it equalizes the situation a little bit.
Yes.
So being like, look, you're my first employee. I don't know if I'm going to do this right. So I need you to tell me what you need and we will collaborate.
I think that is so spot on, that idea of collaboration where, I've told my team, my job or the duties. See, so I always tell people it's not the title, it's the duties, because sometimes when I'm not there, someone has to step up and do the duties to make the machine run. So it's not just me. So the idea is that my role or my duties are no more important than anyone's. They all have to work together, because if you don't do your job, well, then the machine stops. If I don't do my job, the machine stops. But it's that idea, and I love that of, well, I'm not quite 100% sure, but why don't we both research it? Why don't we both go see if we can find a solution together? I think more of that, if more of that happened, or allowing the other person to say, as a leader, to say to your employee, what do you think? And they say, well, I think we should. Well, okay, let's start there and go. I think that solidifies a team and puts you in a much better position as a true leader, because a true leader doesn't think they have all the answers. I think that goes back to even what we were saying in the agency, builds those silos. And then it builds, well, as long as I do my job, I don't care about anyone else. And I don't think your team can move forward if everybody's only focused on themselves.
It's so true. And often the manager is not the subject matter expert in like what their team is doing either. I managed a team of SEO and SEM professionals, and I was by far more well-versed on the SEM side when we started. Mm-hmm. And so you have to trust that they intend good things, that they're going to do the best they can, and give them the tools to use you as a resource. And just like campaigns can't be cookie cutters, people are not cookie cutter. And I hate this idea of leave your private life at the door. Like, I don't know anybody who can like have a pet die and then they walk through the door of their workplace and magically their pet's not dead. Like they don't feel like their pet's dead. Like it's not a thing. Like separate the emotions from the person, absolutely. But we cannot separate our life from our work.
No. And to your point, I think that's a great way to sort of wrap this section up for you, that for the audience that are leaders. is that idea of you hired those people to be expert. I always tell people say, oh, you SEO. I said, my team is way smarter than me, but that's why they're there doing what they do. I need them to bring to the table, hey, there's a new thing, So today, when we're recording this, Google Analytics just said, okay, in a year, we're going to sunset this. And of course, I joke with my team and they're going, don't worry about it. We got it. We'll make sure. Right. But that's why I said, like, my job is to hire smart people and get out of their way. Like, let them do, I have my own things to do. Let them do that. And I think that, again, is that idea of I always looked at it as a sports team or a pit crew and a race team. Like, everybody has their job to do to get that machine back on the track as quickly as possible. That's what I think a leader needs to do, is put the right people in the right positions, make sure they're trained. Your job is to make sure it's running, and then get out of their way and let them do their job. I think that's
I built my teams like puzzles. Like,
that's a great way to think about it.
I am an extroverted, bigger picture, planner, like strategic person. And my right-hand person who now runs the team was an introverted, detail-oriented processes person. And together, honestly, I would work with him 1,000 times over, because our skill sets meshed perfectly. But I knew exactly what I should not do, and it just went to him. And I think that's why I always say self-awareness is the most important trait as a leader. You cannot go anywhere without it. People will tell me communication or but I think you have to know yourself. If you do not know what you're bad at, you can't build a team.
Exactly. And I think probably because it sounds very similar to my brother and I, who were partners in the firm, we very similar. And I will bet you your right hand has made you a little better at process, or more aware of that, like slow you down a little bit. Like, he's a little bit of the brake, but on the flip side, you've probably pulled him out of his shell a little bit to be a little more risky. So it's that gas brake type of thing. And each of you have maybe come a little bit more to the center of understanding each other and how to work together. Doesn't mean you want to do what he does, and I'm sure he doesn't want to do what you do, but understanding that collaboration becomes richer because we understand each other a little better.
And you can ladder it down. So the person I hired to support him was more like me, and the person I hired to support her was more like him. And it's
exactly.
It becomes, so then when someone leaves, it's like a shift where everyone just kind of moves up a little bit.
Absolutely.
In an ideal scenario, it doesn't always happen that way, but yeah.
All right. Well, listen, I love talking to you. See, this time just flies by when you get going. It's always great. So again, everyone, just all of these conversations that we're talking about today, they all have similarities, because even with the marketing, alignment, and collaboration, whether you're doing SEO or pay-per-click and social media, all of that with the client or other vendors, it's that collaboration of a team, very similar to building a team. And I think all of it needs that idea of curiosity, of being willing to say, if I'm running SEO, well, do you need something from paid? Or, hey, by the way, I was doing some research. Maybe it'll help the paid. Maybe it'll help social. Or, hey, I'm running something offline. Where should I drop it online? All of that collaboration, as well as just a team in and of itself, putting all those pieces together. I love that idea of a puzzle. So, all right. So we end every single episode. We call it the 5 ones. So we ask you to talk about one thing, whatever comes to mind first, so you don't have to really think through it. All right. So question number 1 is, when you look back at yourself as, say, a 9th or 10th or 11th grader, my son is 16, and I see this sort of raw, moldy, now you look at yourself. What was the one thing that is similar, that sort of carried through, that if you look back at yourself said, I've always had this one trait? And what's the one trait that is maybe completely different that would surprise your 16-year-old self that you have today?
The first one's ambition. I'm still just as ambitious as ever. And the second one would be self-confidence. I was a quiet teenager. No one believes me when I say that, but I was quiet. Ambition, okay. Self-confidence.
Love that. Love that. That's great. Okay. Next one is, what's the one thing that you're either watching, reading, listening to that is inspiring you, that you would recommend to the audience?
Oh, That is an excellent question, and I'm going to butcher her name, so I apologize to her in advance. But Caitlin Bourgeon, I think it's Bourgeon, her last name to be determined. That's not sure how you say it, but her newsletter about why we buy. It's all psychological, like biases and tendencies matched to marketing, and I am obsessed with this newsletter. So it inspires me all the time. I bring ideas in the classrooms, clients.
Great. We'll put this, all of that in the show notes as well. Okay. One place in the world that you have not been to that you would want to travel to.
Oh, one? Just
one?
I'm going to break the rule. It's a tie.
Okay.
Between Italy and Estonia. Tallinn in Estonia.
Okay, so there they are. Okay, two last questions. What is the one thing when you travel? What's the one thing that you can't live without when you're traveling?
My first instinct was to say my husband, because he keeps me so grounded and organized that it's just like, that's such a terrible answer.
We'll bring him along. Okay.
That was my first instinct. Outside of that, the one thing I can't live without, a camera.
Okay, like a camera or your phone camera?
Either, just something to document. I'm a big documenter. Okay,
all right. Last one. We've talked about a lot of different things, and it has been a phenomenal conversation. What's the one thing that you would hope the audience took away from our conversation? If there was just one thing you said, I hope they got this, what would it be?
That it really does depend, the context piece, that we fall into these binary traps of what is good and what is bad for our marketing, for our teams, for ourselves, for the industry. And we can't think like that. It really, like, we need to slow ourselves down and not just recognize the context for ourselves, but also that if somebody makes a different decision, that it's probably due to context that we don't have. And I see that a lot of the time in doing audits for other agencies' work.
Right.
Is I try not to be really critical of little things, because we don't know what the client said. We don't know how much information they've been given. We don't know what the state of the account was when they got it. We don't know the historical significance of everything. We don't know the offline pieces. And so I think we do a real disservice to ourselves, to our peers, to our teams, to other colleagues in the industry when we don't add a context lens to what we're looking at.
Oh, I love that. Love that. That is phenomenal. Well, wow. So Amalia, this was so much fun. So tell the audience how they can connect with you. I know how I connected with you, but where, if they want to connect with you, where can they find you online?
Absolutely. So the best place is Twitter. My handle is Amalia E. Fowler. Also on LinkedIn, although please add a little message that you're coming from this podcast, because it's getting a little overwhelming on that platform for me.
Yes.
And then I also write the Wholehearted Manager newsletter every other week. We talk about some of these different pieces as it relates to management, and most of the audience are marketers. And you can find that at Wholeheart MNGR, because Twitter doesn't like long handles, on Twitter as well.
Great. Well, I really appreciate your time. This has been a phenomenal conversation. So again, please connect. That's how we met. And when I follow you, I love what you're saying, love your tweets. I'm going to be getting your newsletter. It's been on my list to do. So now that we're chatting, I will get it as well. I think this has been really what I loved about this conversation was a lot of tactical things. And that's always been the goal of this podcast, is to have people be able to come here when they say, now what do I do, and get some tactical things, tactical advice. So audience, you know the drill. Please make sure that you subscribe to the podcast. Please share this out. I know there's someone in your network that could benefit from our conversation today. Please make sure that you subscribe over on Apple or wherever you do it, or on if you're an Android user, anywhere you find podcasts, you can go there, or you can jump over to the YouTube channel of the same name. and you can watch our conversation. Thank you all so much. I appreciate the fact that you joined us today. I know there's a lot of places for you to consume content, but the fact that you spent some time with Amalia and me means the world. Thank you so much. And as I say at the end of every episode, you're in charge. But when you say to yourself, now what? Now what do you do? We're here weekly to help you out. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.